welcome back to another episode of 6 and 6, where we cover 6 stories from around the world in 6 minutes or less. With that said, start your timer. Looking first to Africa, where the trials of Somalian smugglers have been reported in the BBC, outlining the industry and how it funnels alcohol to the capital city of Mogadishu from the border of Ethiopia. From BBC, quote, "The average box of alcohol I move has 12 bottles. I usually transport anywhere from 50 to 70 boxes per trip. Usually half of the load on my truck is filled with alcohol. Large swaths of south-central Somalia are run by armed groups where the government has little to no control. Militias, bandits, and the Al-Qaeda affiliate Al-Shabaab roam with impunity. You can never travel on your own. It's too risky. Death is always on our minds," Mr. Deere said. End quote. The piece continues to outline the intricacies of the travel, including navigating previous minefields, as well as the violence that can be expected while transporting something so illegal, yet so valuable. Across the Atlantic in North America, where the fallout of Tropical Storm Oscar has left many in Cuba stranded. From Reuters, quote, "We should not expect that when the system comes back online, blackouts will end," he said, noting that the system would still generate significantly less than the country's total demand. Cuba's national electronical grid first crashed on Friday after the island's largest power shutdown and dire fuel shortages sent the system into disarray. Cuba's grid has fully or partially failed 3 times since, underscoring the precarious state of the country's infrastructure and putting on edge many Cubans, end quote. Though the system has been restored, there are still fears that unrest could break out within the country, as people have been put on the brink, dealing with shortages of not only power, but food and fuel as well. Next, we come to India, where many startup firms are trying to access the capital in the rural segment of the country. As India continues to expand its economic frontiers, the various types of technologies and services on offer only continue to grow. From BBC, quote, "While a bulk of India's 1.4 billion people still live in its 650,000 villages, they've hardly been a market for its booming tech startups so far. Asia's third largest economy has been a hotbed for innovation, birthing several dozen unicorns or tech companies valued at over $1 billion. But they've all largely built from the top 10% of the urban Indians, according to Udan Daniel, partner at Excel Ventures, which has funded some of the country's most successful ventures, from Flipkart to Swiggy and Urban Company," end quote. Many of these firms have benefited from outside investment from both the urban centers and other countries. The question going forward is this growth sustainable? And when will the money stop flowing? To the southeast of India, we go to Australia. The country has continued to modernize its defense systems, including the new purchase of long-range missiles intended to be used in the country's navy. From BBC, quote, "The SM-5 is the most advanced naval air defense missile in the U.S. arsenal, including against ballistic missiles, and it also has been tested for striking ships and ground targets and in air-to-air scenarios." The quote goes on, "The Standard Missile 6 and Standard Missile 2 Block LLC will enable our Navy to strike maritime, land, and air targets at long range and provide a terminal ballistic missile defense capability, boosting the capacity for the ADF to safeguard Australians and their interests," he said in a statement. This is actually the defense minister for Australia. The quote ends there, but there is more, of course, because tensions are rising in the region, and Australia sees this as a purely defensive move rather than one that is meant to portray aggression. Next to Moldova, where the nation recently voted to make the process of joining the EU embedded into its constitution. Though the vote was indeed close, the decision to prepare for the EU membership was where the populace eventually finished. From BBC, on Sunday, Sandu, the current president, had denounced the narrow result as the product of foreign interference in Moldovan politics and said Moldova had suffered an unprecedented assault on democracy. She accused those of interfering as Moldovan enemies and criminal groups of trying to buy votes and said it was a dangerous phenomenon for any democracy. We finally close in South America, where the arrests are still happening in Venezuela as Maduro seeks to strengthen his grip on the country further. From Reuters, quote, "In a statement on Instagram, Saab said Telchia had been arrested in the early hours of Sunday and alleged, quote, grave crimes against the highest interests of the nation. Telchia, 48, was detained with his closest collaborators, the statement said. After the most recent election, Maduro has continued to lash out and thrash as he feels his political influence slipping. If more changes are to come, there is no doubt that we will cover them in the future. So, if you've enjoyed all of these segments, all of the articles that are outlined here are linked in the description below that like and subscribe button. Also, down there, you can find the podcast that comes out on Monday, Wednesday, Friday at the same YouTube channel or in the RSS feed on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Podvine. And if you want to hear the Twitter tirade, it's over at the Twitter handle at Your Daily Flip. It's a little bit less scripted, just kind of off the top of the head. So, with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe, don't die.